The Swamp's Curse. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I think someone will believe me. Maybe I just need to get it out before I lose my mind completely. Either way, if you're reading this, I hope you never step foot in Blackwater Swamp. We were just a group of friends looking for an adventure. The five of us, Mark, Lisa, Kevin, Rachel, and me, had always loved hiking and exploring places that others avoided. Blackwater Swamp was one of those places. The locals had all sorts of stories about it. Disappearances, strange noises, shadows moving just beyond the trees. But we didn't believe in ghost stories. The first day of our trip was uneventful. We set up camp near the water's edge, just beyond the tree line. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of decaying plants filling our lungs. Mosquitoes buzzed around us, biting at any exposed skin. We laughed, joked, and told scary stories around the fire. None of us had any idea what was coming. That night I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't the usual chirping of crickets or rustling of leaves. It was wet. A slow, sloshing sound, like something heavy dragging itself through the water. I sat up and listened, my heart pounding. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows against the trees. Then I saw it. A shape moved near the water's edge. At first I thought it was a deer or maybe a bear, but it was too large, too wrong. Its limbs were long and thin, its body covered in something dark and slick. It had no eyes that I could see, just a gaping, writhing mouth that dripped with something thick and black. The smell hit me a second later, like rotting meat left in the sun. I tried to scream, but my throat locked up. I turned to wake the others, but as soon as I moved, the thing snapped its head toward me. It made a horrible, guttural sound, something between a growl and a gurgle, and I swear I saw its mouth stretch wider, as if smiling. I don't remember grabbing my flashlight, but suddenly it was in my hand. I clicked it on and aimed the beam at the creature. It shrieked, a sound so high-pitched it felt like it would split my skull. Then it lurched backward, vanishing into the swamp with a sickening splash. The others woke up to my screaming. I tried to tell them what I'd seen, but they just thought I had a nightmare. Lisa even laughed and told me I was spending too much time reading horror stories. I wanted to believe she was right. I really did. The next day, everything seemed normal. No tracks, no sign of anything unusual. I started to think maybe I had imagined it. But as we packed up to move deeper into the swamp, I noticed something. Rachel's boots, which had been outside her tent, were gone. Must have been an animal, Mark said, shrugging. But I saw the look in his eyes. He was just as uneasy as I was. We hiked for hours, following a barely visible path through the muck. The deeper we went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, just the occasional plop of something unseen slipping beneath the water. The air grew colder, heavy with the stench of decay. Then we found the bones, a pile of them half buried in the mud. Some looked human, some didn't. Lisa gasped. Kevin cursed under his breath. I just stared, my skin crawling. We should go back, Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it was too late. The water beside us exploded. Something massive surged upward, a tangle of limbs and rotting flesh. It was faster than before, its dripping arms reaching for Kevin. He barely had time to scream before it grabbed him, yanking him into the swamp. We ran. Branches tore at my skin. I could hear Rachel sobbing, Mark shouting Kevin's name. Behind us, something huge moved through the trees, keeping pace, gurgling and hissing. Then Lisa tripped. I turned just in time to see something wrap around her ankle, pulling her backward. She clawed at the mud, screaming for help. I lunged for her hand, but she was ripped away, vanishing into the black water. We didn't stop running until we saw the road, until we knew we were safe. Except we weren't. The thing took Kevin and Lisa, but it let the rest of us go. Why? I don't sleep anymore. Not really. Every night I hear that wet, sloshing sound outside my window. Every night I wonder if it's waiting, if it's hungry, if it's coming back for the rest of us. The Swamp's Curse Part 2. It's been 6 months since Blackwater Swamp. 6 months of nightmares, paranoia, and that constant gut-wrenching feeling that I'm being watched. Rachel and Mark try to act like things are normal, but I see it in their eyes. They know. They feel it too. Kevin and Lisa are still missing. Officially, the police listed them as presumed drowned, but there were no bodies, no evidence other than our frantic, barely coherent testimonies. They think we got lost, panicked. Some even hinted we had something to do with their disappearance. But I know the truth, and now it's happening again. It started with small things, shadows moving where they shouldn't, a low sloshing sound outside my apartment at night. At first I told myself it was my imagination, the trauma, stress. But then Rachel called me 3 nights ago, her voice trembling. She heard it too. The next day she found muddy footprints in her hallway. The problem? She lives on the 5th floor. No one should have been able to leave them there. Mark won't talk about it. Every time I try to bring it up, he just shakes his head and changes the subject. But I know he's scared. He's been drinking more, showing up to work late, barely sleeping. He hasn't outright said it, but I think he's hearing it too. Then last night, it escalated. I woke up to the sound of water dripping. At first, I thought it was from the bathroom, but then I realized it was coming from my bedroom ceiling. A dark stain had spread across it, thick drops of some foul-smelling black sludge plopping onto my bed. I stared in horror, too afraid to move. Then something shifted above me, a wet, slithering sound. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the ceiling. For the briefest moment I saw it, something pressed against the surface, as if it were trying to push through. The same slick, rotting flesh, the same writhing mouth. Its lips curled back, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. I screamed. The ceiling bulged downward, the drywall cracking, and a long, slimy limb punched through, reaching for me. I ran. Didn't stop to grab anything. Didn't even look back. I just sprinted out of my apartment, down the stairs, and into the freezing night air. I didn't stop running until I reached Rachel's place. She opened the door and took one look at me before pulling me inside. She didn't ask questions. She already knew. Now the 3 of us are here, huddled together in her tiny living room, trying to figure out what to do. Mark hasn't answered his phone. His apartment is only a few blocks away, but neither of us wants to go outside again, because the thing in the swamp never let us go. It followed us home, and it's hungry. The Swamp's Curse, Part 3. Mark is gone. We waited until morning before heading to his apartment. The door was unlocked. Inside, the place was a wreck. Furniture overturned, deep scratches in the walls, the air thick with the stench of stagnant water. His phone lay on the floor, the screen shattered, still open to the last message he had tried to send. It's here. There was no blood, no signs of struggle beyond the destruction, just the faintest trail of dark, wet footprints leading to the window. 5th floor. No fire escape. No way out. Rachel started sobbing. I just stood there, numb, staring at that broken phone, knowing what it meant. Mark didn't just disappear. It took him. The police came, of course. They questioned us, searched the apartment, and just like before, they found nothing. The official story? Mark left on his own. Maybe he was unstable. Maybe he just needed to get away. But we know better. Rachel and I are the only ones left, and I don't think we have much time. That night, we barricaded the doors, blocked the windows, sat together in the dim glow of the television, trying to stay awake. The lights flickered around 2 a.m. The air in the apartment grew thick, damp, like we were standing in the middle of the swamp again. Then came the sound, a slow, wet sloshing. Rachel grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. It was inside. The lights died completely, plunging us into darkness. My phone screen barely lit up, Rachel's pale, terrified face. Somewhere in the apartment, we heard something dragging across the floor. A soft, guttural clicking, like something trying to mimic human speech but failing. The air filled with the scent of rotting meat. We ran for the bathroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Rachel pressed her ear against the wood, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. I fumbled with my phone, trying to call for help, but there was no signal. Then the door creaked, slowly. A single wet finger slipped through the gap beneath it, long, blackened, with too many joints. It twitched, reaching for us. Rachel screamed. I grabbed the only thing I could, a can of aerosol hairspray, and flicked on my lighter. The second the flame touched the mist, a burst of fire roared forward, scorching the doorway. The thing let out a hideous shriek, the sound drilling into my skull like knives. The finger withdrew, and for a few agonizing moments, everything went silent. Then we heard it retreating, that awful sloshing growing fainter and fainter until it finally disappeared. The lights came back on an hour later. The air was still damp, the smell lingering, but the thing was gone. For now, Rachel wants to run, leave town, disappear. But I don't think it matters. Wherever we go, it will find us. It always does. The Swamp's Curse Part 4. Rachel is gone. She wanted to leave town, insisted we needed to run. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't help. This thing isn't just hunting us, it's tied to us. Wherever we go, it will follow. Still, she refused to listen. Last night, she packed a bag, said she'd drive as far as she could, maybe cross state lines. I begged her to stay, but she was already halfway out the door. That was the last time I saw her. This morning, I found her car. It was still in the parking lot, keys in the ignition, driver's side door open. There were muddy footprints leading away from it, barefoot, inhuman. The police are calling it another missing person case. They don't care. They never did. I'm alone now, and I think it knows. The final night. The power is out. My phone is dead. The air in my apartment is thick, damp, suffocating. The walls are slick to the touch, as if moisture is seeping through them. The smell of stagnant water and rot fills my lungs. It's here. I hear it moving in the hallway, dragging itself closer. A slow, deliberate sloshing. The gurgling sound of something ancient, something wrong. There's no point in running. I sit on my bed, gripping the flashlight with trembling hands, waiting. The door creaks open. I don't scream. I don't fight. The last thing I see is its mouth stretching wider than should be possible, rows of needle-like teeth glistening in the dim light. Then darkness. The Swamp's Curse, Part 5. I woke up choking. Cold, putrid water filled my lungs, burning as I coughed and gasped for air. My body felt weightless, suspended in something thick and suffocating. Darkness surrounded me. For a brief, horrifying moment, I thought I was dead, that it had swallowed me whole, consumed me like it had the others. Then I realized I was floating. The surface was above me, a distorted shimmer of pale light filtering through the murky depths. My limbs were sluggish, numb from the cold, but I kicked, fought my way upward. Something brushed against my leg, something long and slimy. Panic surged through me, and I swam harder, pushing toward the light. I broke the surface with a desperate gasp. The air was thick with the scent of rot and decay. I wiped the filth from my face, coughing up the last remnants of whatever foul water I had inhaled. My heart pounded as I looked around. I was in the swamp, not just any part, Blackwater Swamp. The same place we had camped, the same place we had run from. But something was different. The trees were taller, twisted and gnarled, their roots reaching up from the black water like skeletal fingers. The sky above was a sickly shade of gray, no sun, no stars, just an endless void. The swamp was unnaturally still, no wind, no insects, no sound except for the slow, rhythmic dripping of water. I wasn't alone. Shapes lurked in the distance, just beneath the surface, watching, waiting. Then I heard it, the gurgling, wet rasp of something breathing. I turned slowly. It stood at the water's edge, half hidden by the trees. Tall, wrong, familiar. Its slick, blackened skin glistened in the dim light. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide. Those rows of jagged, needle-like teeth curled into something resembling a grin. But there was something else, something worse. It wasn't alone. Figures stood beside it, half submerged, motionless, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their skin was pale, bloated, their hollow eyes locked onto me. My stomach twisted as I recognized them. Lisa, Kevin, Mark, Rachel. They were still, silent. Their mouths hung open, water spilling from their lips as if they had been drowning for an eternity. And then, as one, they began to move. I screamed and turned, thrashing through the water, trying to run, trying to escape. The Swamp's Curse, Part 6. I ran. The water dragged at my legs, thick as oil, slowing me down with every desperate step. Behind me I could hear them. Lisa, Kevin, Mark, Rachel. Moving in perfect unison, their waterlogged bodies sloshing forward, gurgling with each unnatural breath. But worse than them was it. The thing from the swamp. It didn't chase me. It didn't have to. It simply stood there, watching, its mouth stretching wider and wider, as if amused by my struggle. I pushed forward, reaching solid ground, my body aching from the cold. The swamp's shoreline was nothing but twisted roots and mud, but I didn't care. I pulled myself out of the water, my hands sinking deep into the filth. I wanted to throw up, to scream, to wake up from this nightmare. But this was real. The trees loomed above me, their twisted limbs clawing at the sky. The air was thick with the stench of decay, of something old and rotting beneath the surface. And then I saw it. A cabin, small, half sunken into the swamp, its wooden walls warped with age and dampness. The windows were shattered, the door barely hanging on its rusted hinges. I had no other choice. I ran toward it, my breath ragged, my hands shaking as I shoved the door open and stumbled inside. Darkness swallowed me whole. Inside the cabin, the air inside was somehow worse than outside. Damp, heavy. The walls dripped with moisture, the wooden floor warped and broken beneath my weight. I wasn't alone. Something moved in the shadows, a whispering sound, like water lapping against the shore. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers numb with fear. The screen flickered to life, casting a weak, bluish glow through the cabin. That's when I saw them, bones, scattered across the floor, half buried in the muck, some human, some not. And then there was the writing. Scrawled across the walls, etched into the wood was something sharp. It let me go. I thought I was safe. It never stops. I'm still here. My breath hitched. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then I saw the handprints. Everywhere. Pressed into the walls, the floor, the ceiling, as if people had tried to claw their way out. A sound behind me. Slow, wet. Breathing. I turned. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim, sickly light from outside. It wasn't Lisa. It wasn't Kevin. It wasn't anyone I knew. But it had been human once. Its skin was stretched too tight, its limbs elongated and wrong. Black sludge dripped from its open mouth as it took a slow, shuddering step forward. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Then it whispered, "You should not have come back." And the lights went out.